People often believe anger is something others create inside us. We say things like, made me mad, or she really pissed me off. But the truth is, no one actually has that kind of power over you. No one can climb into your chest, flip a switch in your brain, and force anger into you. Anger doesn't come from them, it comes from us. It is not injected into you, it is generated within you. And when you finally realize this, you start to see that anger isn't a punishment you're sentenced to feel. It's a choice you make, sometimes in an instant, sometimes out of habit, but always from within. Now, this doesn't mean anger isn't real or that you're weak for feeling it. Anger is a very human emotion, but the key to mastering it is to understand where it's really born. Anger is simply a reaction, a signal to how we interpret an event. Think about it. Two people can experience the exact same situation, and one explodes with rage while the other stays calm. The difference isn't in the situation. The difference is in how they define it, how they filter it through their mind. That means the control is already yours, even if it doesn't feel like it. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your immediate thought might be, how dare they disrespect me? They don't care about anyone. That thought fuels your anger. But what if your thought was, they must be rushing to something important? Or even, that was reckless, but I'm glad I was alert enough to stay safe. Same situation, two totally different internal stories, and therefore two totally different emotions. The event didn't change, the meaning did, and the meaning is what creates the anger. See, anger thrives in the gap between expectation and reality. You expect someone to treat you a certain way and they don't. You expect the world to work in a certain order, and it doesn't. That gap creates tension and anger steps into the space. But when you redefine anger as an internal signal, not an external attack, you stop being a victim of it. You start seeing it as feedback from your mind, saying, hey, your expectations and reality don't match right now. How do you want to handle that? This is where most people give away their power. They think anger is automatic, uncontrollable. But in reality, anger is optional. You can choose to feed it, fuel it, and let it burst out of you, or you can choose to pause and reframe it. That's not suppression. Suppression is pretending you're not angry, pushing it down until it explodes later. Reframing is acknowledging, yes, I feel irritation rising, but I get to decide what it means. And that one decision makes all the difference between living bothered and living free. Let me put it like this. Imagine someone hands you a burning coal. The moment it touches your palm, you feel pain. That coal is anger. But here's the thing, you don't have to hold it. You can drop it. The mistake most people make is gripping it tighter, holding it up and shouting, look what they gave me! Look how they hurt me! All the while, it's burning them, not the other person. The coal doesn't punish the giver, it punishes the holder. Anger works the exact same way. Holding on to it never harms the person who upset you. It only harms you. So the first step in never feeling angry or bothered is to redefine what anger actually is. Stop seeing it as an external weapon people stab you with and start seeing it as an internal alarm system you control. You can't always stop the alarm from going off, it's natural, but you can decide whether you'll keep listening to it or turn it off. And once you realize that, other people lose the ability to dictate your emotions. Their words, their actions, their attitudes, they can trigger the alarm, but they cannot choose your response. Only you can do that. Think of the power in that. How many arguments could you have avoided if you had remembered that anger is yours, not theirs? How many relationships could have been saved if you had paused to ask, what story am I telling myself about this moment? How much peace could you reclaim if you understood that every time you get angry, you're choosing to hand someone else the steering wheel of your emotions? When you redefine anger, you start taking that wheel back. And here's the beauty of this. Once you realize anger is generated within, you also realize peace is generated within. Calm is not something you wait for, it's something you practice. It's like a muscle. The more you catch yourself saying, this anger isn't theirs, it's mine, the stronger your ability becomes to let it go. The first time might feel impossible. The 10th time might feel easier, and eventually it becomes second nature. That's when you'll notice something remarkable. Situations that used to set you off won't even move you anymore. You'll hear the insult, see the disrespect, feel the inconvenience, and instead of boiling, you'll shrug. Because you've redefined anger, you've taken away its fuel. So the real question isn't, how do I stop people from making me angry? The real question is, how do I stop giving my anger away? And the answer starts with this redefinition. Anger is not theirs to give, it's yours to control. Once you get that, you'll stop being someone who explodes at life, and you'll become someone who navigates it with calm strength. That's the first step to never being bothered again. One of the biggest reasons people feel angry or bothered so easily is because of the ego. The ego is that invisible lens through which we interpret the world, and it's fragile. It wants recognition, it wants to be right, it wants to be respected, and it hates being ignored. Most of the times we flare up in anger, it isn't because of what was said, it's because of what our ego decided that moment meant about us. Somebody criticizes your work, and the ego whispers, they don't respect you. Someone cuts in front of you in line, and the ego shouts, they think you're weak. Even when a loved one forgets something important, the ego twists it into, they don't care about you. The situation itself may be small, but the ego magnifies it until it feels personal. If you want to stop being angry or bothered, you must learn to detach the ego from every interaction. That means you stop letting every action or word filter through the question, what does this say about me? Because in reality, most of the time it doesn't say anything about you. It says something about them. The co-worker who snaps at you is carrying stress from their own life. The stranger who insults you online is projecting their frustration. The driver who honks and yells isn't angry at you as a person. They're angry at life, at their day, at their own impatience. But if your ego steps in, suddenly it feels like they're attacking your worth, your dignity, your identity. And that's when you lose your calm. Detaching your ego is like putting on armor. You can still hear the criticism, see the disrespect, feel the rejection, but it doesn't pierce you. Because you realize it's not about you, it's about them. When someone insults you and you detach your ego, you don't hear, I'm worthless. You hear, that person is hurting. When someone tries to belittle you, you don't think, I must prove myself. You think, they need to feel bigger right now. This shift completely changes the way you experience conflict. Instead of reacting with fire, you respond with calm curiosity, or sometimes with silence. Now, detaching the ego doesn't mean you stop caring about yourself or that you let people walk over you. It means you stop letting your self-worth hinge on how other people treat you. Imagine a king sitting on a throne. Does he rise to argue with every peasant who mocks him? No, he stays seated, because their words cannot touch his crown. That's what it means to detach your ego. You already know your value, so you don't feel compelled to fight for it every time someone questions it. Think about how much of our anger is really about proving something. Proving we're right in an argument, proving we're capable at work, proving we deserve respect in public. The ego is desperate for validation, and when it doesn't get it, it lashes out in anger. But when you let go of that need to constantly prove yourself, you take away the fuel that keeps irritation alive. Suddenly, arguments that once consumed hours don't even feel worth starting. Small slights that once ruined your day roll off your back. Why? Because your sense of self isn't on trial anymore. Here's an exercise. The next time someone criticizes you, pause and ask yourself, am I upset because what they said is true, or am I upset because my ego feels bruised? You'll find that 9 times out of 10, it's the ego. If their words hold no truth, why let them in? And if they do hold some truth, then that's not an insult, it's feedback. Either way, anger isn't necessary. The ego only makes it personal when it doesn't have to be. Detaching ego also frees you from overthinking. How many times have you replayed a conversation in your head, angry about what someone said, and imagined what you should have replied? That's the ego demanding you win a battle that doesn't even matter anymore. When you detach, you don't feel the need to keep score. You simply let go because peace is worth more than the last word. The deepest freedom comes when you realize you are not the ego. You are not every label, every criticism, every compliment, or every opinion. You are more than that. When you stop tying your identity to every interaction, you stop riding the emotional roller coaster of anger and irritation. People will still talk, situations will still happen, but your calm will remain untouched. And here's the truth. Most people live their entire lives enslaved by ego without knowing it. They fight wars in their heads, pick battles on the street, and argue endlessly at home. Not because they want to, but because their ego can't stand the idea of losing face. Detaching the ego is like walking off that battlefield completely. You're no longer fighting to be seen because you've already seen yourself clearly. You're no longer fighting to be respected because you respect yourself. You're no longer fighting to be right because your peace matters more than your pride. When you start to practice this, life becomes lighter. Conversations feel less threatening. Criticism feels less sharp. Disrespect feels less personal. And you begin to notice something incredible. It's almost impossible to anger a person who has nothing to prove. That's the gift of detaching your ego. Most anger doesn't come from the situation itself. It comes from our immediate reaction to it. Those first few seconds after someone insults you, cuts you off, or challenges you are the most dangerous, because in those moments we rarely think we react, and reaction is where anger lives. But if you can learn to create just a small pause before you respond, you take back control of the entire moment. That pause is the difference between exploding and staying calm, between regret and dignity, between letting someone else control you and choosing for yourself. Think about the times you've said something in anger and instantly wished you could take it back. Maybe it was snapping at a loved one, cursing at a stranger, or firing off that message you shouldn't have sent. Those moments happen because we didn't pause. We let the heat of the moment dictate our words, and once words leave your mouth, you can't pull them back. That's why the pause is so powerful. It stops anger from taking the wheel before you even realize what's happening. The pause doesn't have to be long. It can be 3 seconds, 5 seconds, maybe just one deep breath. But those seconds give your brain enough time to switch gears. In psychology, this is called moving from the amygdala, the emotional center that wants to fight, to the prefrontal cortex, the rational part that weighs consequences. When you pause, you're not denying the emotion. You're simply giving your mind the space to choose a better response. Imagine someone shouts at you in traffic. Without the pause, your instinct is to shout back, slam the horn, or escalate the situation. But if you pause, if you take one breath and ask yourself, what outcome do I want here? Suddenly, the urge to fight fades. You realize nothing good comes from yelling. You realize your peace is more valuable than winning against a stranger you'll never see again. That single pause can save you from a ruined day, or even from a dangerous situation spiraling out of control. The same is true in relationships. Your partner says something careless, and the ego wants to snap back instantly. But in the pause, you recognize that maybe they're stressed, maybe they didn't mean it the way it came out, maybe reacting with anger will only turn a small moment into a major fight. With just a pause, you can choose words that bring clarity instead of conflict. That's not weakness, that's strength. It takes far more power to hold back than it does to lash out. The pause is also where perspective enters. Without it, we only see the offense. With it, we see the bigger picture. Someone is rude to you at work. Without the pause, you think, they disrespected me. With the pause, you might think, maybe they're under pressure, or this isn't worth my energy. That doesn't mean you let people mistreat you. It means you respond in a way that protects your dignity instead of damaging it. The pause lets you choose assertiveness without aggression, calm without passivity. Some people think pausing makes them look weak, like they're letting others get away with bad behavior. But here's the truth, the pause is not surrender, it's strategy. It's the ability to control yourself before anyone else controls you. It's saying, I am not a puppet to your words, I decide how this moment goes. And often, the greatest power move is silence. When someone expects you to react and you don't, they lose all control over you. They feed on your reaction, and when you give them none, you starve the conflict. Training yourself to pause is like building a muscle. At first, it feels impossible. You'll catch yourself reacting, regretting, and wishing you had stopped, but with practice, you'll start noticing the space between trigger and response. That's when you know the muscle is growing. Start small. Practice in low-stakes situations. When someone takes too long in line, pause. When someone interrupts you, pause. When someone cuts you off mid-sentence, pause. The more you do it, the easier it becomes to carry that same pause into bigger, more emotional moments. And the pause isn't just about silence, it's about choice. In that space, you can decide, do I let this go? Do I respond calmly? Do I set a boundary? Do I simply walk away? Every option protects your peace more than exploding in anger ever could. Because anger feels powerful in the moment, but it leaves you weaker afterward. The pause feels difficult in the moment, but it leaves you stronger afterward. So the next time you feel that fire rising, remember the power is not in the reaction, it's in the pause. That pause is where your dignity lives. That pause is where your wisdom speaks. That pause is where you stop being someone controlled by the world and start being someone who controls themselves. Master the pause, and you master your peace. One of the most effective ways to stop feeling angry or bothered is to shift your perspective. And the most powerful tool for shifting perspective is empathy. Anger often thrives when we assume the worst about someone's behavior. We tell ourselves, they disrespected me, or they did this to hurt me, or they don't care. But what if, instead of assuming the worst, you trained yourself to assume there's more to their story? That's what empathy does. It dissolves irritation by expanding your view beyond yourself. Think about it. When someone cuts you off on the road, your first thought is usually, that jerk doesn't care about anyone but himself. Anger rises immediately. But if you paused and asked, what if they're rushing to a hospital? What if they're late to pick up their child? What if they're just overwhelmed? Suddenly, your irritation softens. The situation hasn't changed, but your interpretation has. Empathy doesn't excuse the behavior, but explains it in a way that keeps you from being consumed by it. When you start looking at people through empathy, you realize most rude or irritating behavior has very little to do with you. The coworker who snaps at you might be carrying stress from a fight at home. The cashier who seems uninterested might be exhausted from a double shift. The stranger who makes a cruel comment online might be dealing with pain you'll never see. Truth is, hurt people. And when you recognize that, you stop making everything about you. You see their behavior as a reflection of their struggle, not an attack on your value. Now, empathy doesn't mean you let people mistreat you or cross boundaries. It doesn't mean you excuse bad behavior. It means you choose not to carry unnecessary anger about it. You can acknowledge that person is acting out of their own pain and still decide, but I'm not going to let that pain spread into me. Empathy creates understanding, and understanding creates distance between you and anger. Perspective also shifts when you remember times you've been on the other side. Think back to when you snapped at someone, not because they did anything wrong, but because you were tired, stressed, or hurt. Did you want them to judge your whole character by that moment? Of course not. You wanted grace, and if you've needed grace, it's easier to give it. Empathy is remembering we've all been the rude one or the irritating one at some point. When you train yourself to see people as human beings with struggles, you stop treating every offense as a personal insult. Empathy also frees you from the trap of overreaction. When you see others through a narrow lens, every slight feels huge. But when you step back and see the bigger picture, you realize most things don't deserve your energy. For example, your partner forgets to text you back. Without perspective, your mind spins. They don't care. They're ignoring me. Anger grows. With perspective, you think maybe they're busy. Maybe they got distracted. Maybe it's not a reflection of their love at all. Same event, completely different emotional outcome. The event doesn't decide your mood, your perspective does. This mindset becomes especially powerful in long-term relationships, whether with family, friends, or a spouse. People you love will make mistakes. They'll say things the wrong way, they'll forget things, they'll disappoint you. If you approach every slip with anger, you'll drain the relationship. But if you train yourself to see beyond the mistake, to remember their love, their intentions, their humanity, you stop letting small moments poison something bigger. Empathy turns conflict into compassion. It lets you ask, what might they be going through? Instead of, how dare they treat me this way? That single shift keeps relationships alive and your peace intact. Another key part of perspective is recognizing the limits of your knowledge. You never know the full story of someone's life. You never know what burdens they carry. That stranger who seems cold might be battling depression. That boss who seems harsh might be under enormous pressure you'll never see. The world is filled with invisible battles. And once you accept that truth, you stop assuming malice behind every action. Empathy replaces suspicion with curiosity, and curiosity leaves no room for anger. Here's the beauty of this. Empathy doesn't just reduce your anger, it increases your strength. Because the person who can stay calm while others are rude isn't weak. They're powerful. They're the ones who can look past the surface and see the deeper reality. They're the ones who refuse to let someone else's storm pull them under. Empathy is a form of armor. It shields you from unnecessary pain by reminding you, this isn't about me, this is about them. Training your perspective with empathy is not something that happens overnight. It takes practice. Start by catching yourself in small moments. When you feel irritation rising, ask, what else could be going on here? What's a more generous explanation? Even if you never know the truth, the act of asking dissolves anger. Over time, this becomes second nature, and one day, you'll notice that situations that once sent you into frustration now barely stir you. Not because the world has changed, because your perspective has. At the end of the day, empathy doesn't just make you calmer, it makes you freer. It breaks the chains that tie your emotions to everyone else's behavior. It lets you walk through life with understanding instead of irritation, with compassion instead of judgment. And when you live that way, anger finds no place to grow. One of the main reasons people feel constantly angry, bothered, or drained by others is because they haven't built strong boundaries around their mental and emotional space. Without boundaries, it's like leaving the front door of your house wide open. Anyone can walk in, track mud on the carpet, move things around, and leave chaos behind. And just like your home, your mind is your private space. If you don't decide who gets in and how long they stay, other people will fill it with their negativity, their drama, their demands, and their noise. Protecting your mental space isn't selfish, it's survival. Many of us were raised to believe that saying yes to everyone and everything makes us kind. But what it often does is make us exhausted. Because every yes you give that goes against your own well-being is really a no to yourself. When you don't set boundaries, you allow other people's energy to control yours. And sooner or later, that builds resentment. You get irritated, frustrated, angry, not just at them, but at yourself for not standing up for your peace. Boundaries are how you prevent that cycle. They're not walls to shut people out, they're guardrails to keep relationships healthy. When you tell someone, I can't talk about this topic, or I need space right now, or I won't tolerate disrespect, you're not being rude. You're being clear, and clarity is kindness. Because you're showing people how to treat you without exploding in anger later. You're managing conflict before it even begins. Protecting your mental space also means being intentional about who gets your time and attention. Think about your phone for a moment. If you hand it to just anyone, they could drain your battery with apps, videos, calls, and texts. But when you're selective, when you only allow trusted people access, you keep it charged for what really matters. Your mind works the same way. Every interaction, every conversation, every complaint you listen to either charges you or drains you. And if you're not careful, you'll give your mental battery away to people who don't deserve it, leaving you running on empty. Some of the most common situations where anger rises are the ones where people repeatedly cross unspoken boundaries. A friend who only calls when they need something. A coworker who piles their tasks on you. A family member who criticizes you under the disguise of just being honest. Each time you feel a wave of frustration. But here's the truth. If you don't set a boundary, they'll keep doing it. And your silence isn't peace, it's permission. Protecting your mental space requires the courage to say, this doesn't work for me. Well, now, boundaries don't have to be loud or aggressive. They can be simple and calm. Sometimes it's as small as choosing not to respond right away to a negative text. Sometimes it's deciding not to attend an event that always leaves you drained. Sometimes it's walking away from an argument instead of trying to win it. These are all forms of protecting your space, and every time you do it, you train yourself to choose peace over anger. Here's the beautiful part: the more you practice setting boundaries, the less you'll need to use anger as a defense mechanism. Most people lash out because they've allowed a situation to go too far for too long. They didn't speak up, they didn't set limits, and now they explode. Boundaries prevent that. They allow you to handle situations at the first spark before the fire starts. That way you can remain calm, steady, and in control, never reactive. Think about a garden. If you don't put up a fence, weeds and animals will take over. Not because they're evil, but because that's what they do. The same goes for people. If you don't draw lines, some will naturally push, take, and intrude. A fence doesn't make you mean, it makes your garden thrive. And when your inner garden is thriving, you don't feel as angry or bothered by others. Protecting your mental space also involves what you feed your mind. If you constantly surround yourself with negativity, whether from media, toxic conversations, or environments, you're letting pollution in. Boundaries mean being selective about what voices you allow into your head. It's okay to mute, unfollow, or step back from anything that doesn't serve your peace, because your peace is not negotiable. And don't forget, boundaries are not just about keeping things out, they're also about letting the right things in. When you create space by saying no to what drains you, you open room for what nourishes you. That might mean spending time with uplifting people, engaging in hobbies that energize you, or simply being alone to recharge. Protecting your mental space means valuing it enough to fill it with what keeps you calm, inspired, and strong. At first, setting boundaries can feel uncomfortable. People may resist. They may accuse you of changing, of being distant, of not caring. But remember this: the people who truly respect you will respect your boundaries. The ones who don't respect them are the very reason you need them. You cannot control how others react, but you can control how much access they have to your peace. Ultimately, protecting your mental space is about reclaiming your power. It's about choosing not to let the chaos of others become the chaos inside you. When you master this, you stop living at the mercy of people's moods, demands, or negativity. You become grounded. You become centered. And anger loses its grip on you because you've built a space it cannot reach. One of the hardest lessons in life, but also one of the most freeing, is learning how to let go. Anger often lingers not because of what someone said or did in the moment, but because we hold on to it long after the event has passed. We replay conversations, we analyze insults, we dig our heels into resentment. And the truth is, carrying all that weight doesn't punish the person who hurt us. It punishes us. It's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. The art of letting go is the skill of choosing your peace over your pride, your future over your past, and your freedom over your frustration. Think about it. How many hours, days, even years have been wasted stewing over something you couldn't change? A rude comment, a betrayal, a disappointment, a loss of opportunity. We cling to the story because in some way it makes us feel in control. We think that by holding on to the anger, we're holding on to justice. But all we're really doing is trapping ourselves in the past. Letting go doesn't mean what happened was okay. It doesn't mean you forget or excuse it. It means you stop letting it control your present. There's a story I love about two monks who were walking together. They came across a woman who needed help crossing a river. One monk carried her across, set her down, and they continued on. Hours later, the other monk said, "I can't believe you carried that woman. We're not supposed to touch women." And the first monk replied, "Brother, I set her down hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" That's exactly what we do with anger. We carry things long after the moment is over. We let it live rent-free in our heads, poisoning every thought. The art of letting go is learning to set it down. One of the ways to practice letting go is to recognize the difference between what you can control and what you cannot. You cannot control people's opinions. You cannot control their actions. You cannot control the past, but you can control your response. You can control whether you keep replaying the offense. You can control whether you allow someone's mistake to define your day, your mood, or your identity. That's where your power is. And when you realize that, letting go feels less like losing and more like winning. Anger often attaches itself to ego. We think, if I let this go, they get away with it. If I let this go, I look weak. But letting go is not weakness, it's strength. It takes far more courage to release bitterness than to cling to it. Anyone can hold a grudge. It takes true power to say, this no longer has power over me. Forgiveness, too, is part of this. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and it doesn't mean trust. Forgiveness means releasing the grip of anger on your own heart. It's a gift you give yourself more than the other person. There's also wisdom in understanding that anger rarely changes the offender. They go on with their lives. They may not even remember what they did. Meanwhile, you're left with the burden of replaying it. That's like shackling yourself to a fire and wondering why you keep getting burned. Letting go is cutting that chain. It's stepping back from the fire and realizing, I don't need to carry this anymore. Letting go doesn't just apply to people, it applies to expectations too. Sometimes we get angry because reality didn't match the picture in our head. We expected loyalty and we got betrayal. We expected gratitude and we got silence. We expected ease and we got struggle. Clinging to how it should have been only breeds frustration. Letting go means accepting life as it is, not as we wish it to be. It doesn't mean you stop striving, it means you stop resisting reality. And resistance is what feeds anger. You might be thinking, but how do I actually let go? It's not a one-time decision, it's a practice. It's choosing day by day, thought by thought, not to water the seeds of anger. Every time the memory comes up, you have a choice: replay it or release it. Some people find it helpful to write the anger down on paper and physically throw it away. Others use meditation, prayer, or breathing exercises to quiet their minds. Some use perspective, asking, will this matter a year from now? Will it matter in 5? Letting go isn't about erasing, it's about loosening your grip until what once felt heavy now feels light. Another key is to fill the space anger leaves behind. When you release bitterness, you create room for peace, gratitude, and joy. Focus on what's good, on what's working, on who loves and supports you. Replace the replay of pain with a replay of blessings. The more you redirect your energy, the less space anger has to grow. At the core, letting go is about reclaiming your freedom. Imagine walking with a backpack filled with rocks, each rock representing a grudge, an insult, a disappointment. You get heavier and heavier until life feels unbearable. Now imagine setting that backpack down. Your steps feel lighter, your breathing is easier. That's what happens when you let go. You don't erase the past, you stop carrying it. And here's the truth: you deserve to be free. You deserve to live without the constant weight of irritation, resentment, or anger. Life is too short to give endless energy to things and people that no longer deserve a seat at your table. The art of letting go is not about ignoring reality, it's about choosing a better one for yourself. And once you master it, you'll find that anger no longer has a grip on you, because you've learned to release it before it ever settles in. So here's the truth: anger doesn't come from other people. It comes from us. It's not what they say, not what they do, not how they act, it's how we choose to respond. And the greatest freedom you can ever give yourself is to stop letting others dictate your peace. We started by learning how to pause before reacting, because that pause is where your power lies. Then we talked about managing your self-talk, because the story you tell yourself about an event shapes how you feel about it. We dug into the power of empathy, shifting perspective to see that most people's behavior comes from their own pain, not from disrespect toward you. We learned to build strong boundaries to protect your mental space so you're not drained by everyone else's drama. And we practiced the art of letting go, because holding on to bitterness doesn't punish them, it only punishes you. Put these together, and what you have is not just a strategy, it's a lifestyle. A way of walking through the world untouchable by negativity, unshaken by disrespect, unbothered by the noise. You become steady, you become grounded, and when everyone else is losing their cool, you're the one who keeps your peace. Remember, this calm is not weakness. Letting go is not weakness. Boundaries are not selfish. They are strength. They are power. They are the tools that let you live above the chaos instead of drowning in it. And if you take nothing else from today, take this: your peace is worth protecting. Don't hand it over to every rude driver, every negative coworker, every careless comment. Your peace is yours. Guard it. Grow it and carry it with you into every room you walk into. Because the moment you decide that no one else controls your emotions but you, that's the moment you'll never feel angry or bothered by anyone again.